Welcome to Straight Line MTB, and today we have invited the Ripley AF to come in and tell us how it feels. Welcome to Straight Line MTB, and I'm excited to share my long-term review of the Ibis Ripley AF. I've had this bike and have put it through its paces on my local trails, and enough time to give you some real-world feedback and a long-term review of this amazing bike. So speaking of this bike, I purchased this bike from Alpine Bike Works in Killington, Vermont. Tony and his team took great care of me. They have awesome availability of Ibis and Yeti bikes, so if you're in the market, reach out to them and see what they have to offer, because he always has the bikes that are hard to find. So whether you're new to the bike game or you're an old vet like myself, you have probably heard quite a bit about Ibis bicycles. Ibis is best known for their just beautiful carbon boutique frames, whether it's enduro, trail, or cross country. But when they started with aluminum frames. So the Ripley AF is their second re-release of an aluminum frame into the wild. The first one was the Ripmo AF. That's their 160 millimeter bike. We reviewed that bike, so if you're interested to hear more about it, check out our channel where we reviewed it, and I love that bike. It was a great bike. But back to the Ripley AF, it is an aluminum frame. It is a more updated version of their Ripley V4. The V4 is a carbon frame, where obviously this is an aluminum frame, but the Ripley AF has a little bit slacker head tube angle. The seat tube angle is a little bit steeper, but otherwise the geometry numbers are very similar to the V4, aside from the wheelbase, which you get a little bit longer from that slacked out head tube angle. But other than that, and the weight, this bike came in ready to ride as you see it, with our Tannis tubeless armor, pedals, which it does not have right now, and the Assegai tires. It came in at 33.5 pounds ready to ride. So it's a little bit on the heavy side for a light trail bike. So you'll think for $3,300 for this bike, which currently they have raised the price to, I believe, $3,500. You're getting an aluminum frame bike with mostly GX drivetrain. Our bike came with a GX shifter, where it's spec'd with the NX shifter, so that was a bonus. But thinking of $3,300 for this bike, I think the quality is really high. You look at it, the welds are great, and one thing I think it goes overlooked is the paint. The paint quality on this bike is really nice. I've had bikes that were $5,000 and $6,000 where just any rock would chip the paint off. This bike has not suffered any chips from rocks, so that's a real bonus, I think, and something that I think is overlooked again with a boutique brand. Ibis offers that higher quality, and then the welds, just everything about this bike looks really nice. The only thing I would gripe about is maybe the chainstay protection. It's just, some mastic tape. I know on the higher end bikes you see the molded plastic with the soft rubber. I would like to see something like that, but I won't say that this bike is loud. It wasn't chattery and loud. I saw some reports about people complaining the cables were loud on the inside. That wasn't a big issue for me. The cable ports, similar to the Ripmo AF, there was some clutter and issue around the water bottle cage, but otherwise the bike seems fine. You do kind of have a little hassle putting a water bottle in there. You got to maneuver your cables a little bit, but otherwise the bike, I think you look at it, it's something you would expect from Ibis, and then you wouldn't expect it to be a $3,300 bike because it is so nice and the component spec is really great. If you want to get more information about the geometry or the component spec, go check out our channel where I talk about our first ride review and a little bit more information about this bike. All right, so now let's talk about this bike on the trail and how it climbs. So 120 millimeter rear, 130 millimeter bike, you're expecting it to be a great climber, and I'm gonna tell you, it is a great climber. This bike is able to get up any trail, technical sections you want, and I think that really has to do with those 35 millimeter internal width wheels and those real fat tires. It's able to grab traction. Those fatter tires do give you a little bit more squish, so you're not feeling the trail as much. And then again, the traction is unbelievable for a 120 millimeter bike. It just really claws its way up, and then also depending on your tires, this thing just really wants to get up to the top. And then feeling in the cockpit, I felt like it's a little bit more compact than that 475 millimeter reach felt. It felt like it was a little bit shorter when you're in the saddle. I wouldn't say it was uncomfortable. It does give you a more upright position, but on the good side is it allows you to maneuver this bike a little bit better than you'd expect. So like the Spur, which has a very similar wheelbase, I felt that the Ripley AF, you're able to kind of, pull the front end up and maneuver this bike around just a hair better than that Spur. And I think that's due to that little bit compact feeling in the saddle. And then going back to those wider wheels and tires, I felt like I did notice a little bit more drag from those tires. You are getting, more rubber onto the trail, which is obviously going to give you a little bit more rolling resistance. Our bike came spec'd with the dual assegais, which I did not ride, but I did ride some 2.6 Eliminator and Butcher on this bike, which are a little bit faster rolling than the assegais. So you will notice, not only just the weight, but also that rolling resistance. But the benefit of it is you get more traction and you're eating up those little small bits that may, hurt your butt when you're sitting in the saddle, because I'm not out of the saddle guy. I like comfort. So it wasn't a horrible experience. I did go ahead and try some 30 millimeter internal width rims and 2.5 and 2.4 tires on this bike, just to kind of get what it would feel like with a narrower wheel and tire. And I will say that it did translate into a little bit better climbing, more snappiness at the pedals. You did lose that comfort a bit because you did feel that, it's not absorbing some of those smaller areas. Traction wasn't as ample as it was with those fatter wheels and tires, but I didn't feel like it was a detriment to the bike. So I really like the option. So if you wanted to get another wheel and get a little bit faster up the trail, or you want just all out traction for those technical sections, you got it with this bike. So that was a great option. So Ibis has DW Link patented on all their bikes, and that is something I would say a little bit of magic. So you do notice, I felt like I noticed when I'm on a DW Link such as the Ibis, that on the climbs, it's almost like there's a switch in this bike. You'll be like, oh, there's pedal bob in this bike. But what you notice is that the bike is actually moving under you when you're in those technical bumpy sections. And then once you hammer on the pedals, it stiffens up real nice. So you got the efficiency and the comfort, which is pretty amazing, especially for somebody like me that sits in the saddle most of my rides, so you're not really tearing up your back end. It's really their comfort and it's performance. So I rarely use the lockout. I would do it on some of the smoother climbs. I'd put the lockout, but if you're going to give me a lockout, because I'm not a very efficient climber, I'm a big boy and I want to get there, I suffer to the top to get to the bottom, I'll switch the lockout. But I felt like if it was not there was no lockout there, I probably wouldn't use it. So on to the downhill. So let me preface downhill performance with any bike that I ride is that I love big bikes. I'm an overbike guy whenever possible, just because I'm gonna suffer on the climbs because I want to enjoy the downhills. I could be on a hardtail, cross country, or a big 160 millimeter bike. I'm still gonna hate getting to the top. So I was very appreciative of the Ibis because it did give you a little bit of that bigger bike feel. It felt very similar to the Ripmo AF on the downhills, where it really pushed me faster. Just like the Ripmo AF, they both pushed me really fast. But it did push me a little bit closer to finding the limits of the bike. So I wouldn't say that's a bad thing, but it just shows you how capable this bike is. It wants to go. It wants to hit stuff really fast. But I will say at 120 millimeters, you're going to find the limits of this bike quicker than you would with a 140 or enduro bike. But of course, we're not going to knock it because it is only 120 millimeter bike. Back to those fat wheels and tires, I think on the downhills, those really help this bike. It ate up that small chatter. It gave you that extra bit of cushion in the technical sections. I've taken this bike anywhere from smooth jump trails to just black diamond gnarly chunk, and I really didn't feel that I was undergunned as much with this bike. Of course, I'm not going to ride it like a 160 millimeter enduro bike, but I felt like the Ripley AF really sat outside of its category. You would think 120 millimeter bike, it's gonna, we're gonna be able to do some stuff, but just not everything. I felt like with some correction on your riding end, you're able to hit trails that maybe you wouldn't expect, and maybe a little bit more comfortably. So if you guys want to go to our channel, I put this bike back to back up against the Transition Spur and the YT Izzo, And I will say, of the group, this bike was the fastest downhiller when it was just straight downhill. This bike was able to be snappy. The pedaling helps. It's really a snappy pedaler. Once you get on it, it wants to go. And then the biggest surprise to me, because this was the heaviest bike by about 5 pounds against those bike, is it was probably one of the more poppy bikes. Hitting jumps, you're catching air. It's crazy. It doesn't feel like a 33-pound plus bike. It really wants to pop and have a good time, and it could be to that more compact feeling that you're able to throw this bike around, have a great time. And then again, with those fat tires, you're getting that extra bit of confidence on the downhill. Again, the wheelbase is a little bit shorter at 12/17, so you're going to want to, you'll find the limits. I don't think it was an abrupt, where you're, oh no, I'm going to crash. It was more like, okay, let's dial it back just a tiny bit. I did find on the really, really, really technical Black Diamond Trail against the other two bikes, those wider wheels, this bike was not as fast as the transition spurt. And I think it could have been more due to the wider wheels, just maybe a little bit more rolling resistance, but it was more comfortable. And then I did really appreciate that those wider wheels. And then speaking of the swap, so I did swap them for the narrow 30mm internal width rims and the narrower tires. Again, similar to the climbing, you do feel the trail a little bit more, which is expected because you don't have that beef in the back. So I don't know where I stand. I like the efficiency of the climb, but I also with the narrow wheels, but I do like the little bit mute of the trail and extra millimeter of suspension from the fatter tires. So I don't know. It's good versatility for you. So if you want to, run it as is and get a little bit more of a brawler, or you want to get some little bit lighter weight wheels, maybe some carbon, get a little bit narrow, you're going to be a little bit faster on the uphill, and I don't think you compromise too much on the downhill. So I think that's a great option to have. So let's talk about the components on our Ibis Ripley AF. This is the N/GX model. So our version came with a GX shifter, where it should be spec'd with the NX shifter, which I'm not sad about. That was good. It comes with an NX chain and an NX cranks. Otherwise, the derailleur and the cassette, all GX. So that is a solid performer. The dropper post, the KS Lev is good. It's the lower end, but I didn't have an issue with it. The Southpaw remote, it's not your traditional Southpaw remote, is the cheaper version. So I didn't like it. I don't like it that much. It's a little bit notchy. It's not intuitive when you're pushing it. So that might be something as a long-term bike that you're going to keep, something that you might want to change. I did not try to put some grease down the tube with the cable. That might help that, but otherwise it just wasn't a great feeling. Otherwise, the cockpit feels really good. The Ibis components, I didn't have an issue with it. I like the 31.8mm bar more than 35 in aluminum because it gives you a little bit more compliance. The grips are a little bit on the thin side, but that's preference, of course. Again, the wheels, I've talked about them on the climbing and the descending. That 35mm internal width is something that you either really, really like, or you might want to complement with a narrower wheel set. The brakes, the Guide Rs, I consistently find, oh, sorry, not Guide, but G2Rs. I consistently find that those brakes for me are a little bit underwhelming in the braking department. Again, I talk about how this bike really pushes you and wants you to go a little bit faster. And then when you get into the point where you're going to have to pull it back a little bit, those brakes might be a little bit lacking. I've had the G2 Rs, the RSs, and the RSCs, and it doesn't matter. They all have the same stopping power. So but don't take my word for it. If you're getting this bike, try the brakes. They might work for you. You might really appreciate and enjoy them. So just something that you can ride, and hopefully that they do work for you, it's just one less thing you'd have to change. I don't think I would change anything on this bike aside from depending what tires you get, and then maybe complementing it with another narrower wheel set. So just an overview, quick evaluation of this bike. So I think you got to factor in for $3,500 Ibis as a brand and the quality that they put out. The paint is really great. The aluminum frame is very well done. And then the customer service. I've had some needs in the past with frames through Ibis, and they are going to be a brand that's going to be there for you. They're going to respond to your emails. They're going to, in my instance, they overnighted a frame to me, so I didn't have a lapse in riding. So I appreciate that. And speaking of the versatility, I think you can bring to this bike, swapping out the wheel sets, having one or the other. I like that you're able to, you know, if you want to spend a little bit more and get some carbon wheels on this bike, you have a bike that's going to borderline a little bit of cross country, maybe a heavier cross country bike, getting a little bit more snappiness and losing a little bit of weight for those long days, those long climbs. Maybe you live in a little flatter area of the states or wherever you're at. Oh, and then also having those wider wheels and tires, those 35 millimeter internal width tires with those 2.5 width tires, you're able to get a little bit more confidence. It's going to eat up the trail a little bit more, give you some more traction. So this bike can be set up really well to be, you know, a one bike if you're not really smashing bike parks and things like that. And it also could be a great complement to like a bigger bike. I think this bike is far enough, just far enough, I think, away from the Ripmo AF that you can have both of these bikes, the Ripmo AF and the Ripley AF, and really have a 1-2 punch. It's going to get you to do a lot of trails, and you're going to have two bikes for the price of maybe a really nice carbon boutique brand bike. All right, thank you guys for joining me. I hope this video was helpful. Please give us a little bit of help. Give us a like, subscribe to our channel so we can continue to bring you some more awesome content, bring in some more bikes, some more gear, and some more reviews for you guys. If you have any questions, comments, let me know down below. I will get back to you as soon as possible. And also you can send any message to us on our website at straightlinemtb.com. Don't forget to come follow us on Instagram and TikTok at straightline_mtb. Get a little bit more daily content and see what we're doing. Maybe some giveaways that we like to do and some upcoming stuff that we're working on. Again, thank you guys so much. Can't wait to bring you some more reviews, so stay tuned and we'll see you on the next video. This is hard. I don't know, you guys, it's hard. All right.